Hello, listeners. It's Gunter here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked #1 in Australia and #5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. And today I'm going to pick up a number of threads from my recent conversation with Professor Greg Downey, or should I say his conversation with me. Now, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, Greg and I explored masculinity through the lens of anthropology, how it has evolved, how toxic ideologies take hold, how politics and religion get tangled up, and why emotional health and community are central if we want anything resembling a humane future for men and for our society. So today I want to slow things down and I'm going to ask a simple question. What does all of that actually mean for how you live your life this week? Think of this as a debrief, but also as a practice-focused episode. Less theory, more what do I do with this? So let's get into it. When I replay the conversation in my mind, three things keep surfacing. Firstly, masculinity is something that we do, not something we are. Anthropology reminds us that masculinity is embodied, it's relational, and it's practiced. It's not a fixed essence inside our DNA, hiding or otherwise. And it shows up in how you speak, how you move through a room, and how you respond to conflict. Who gets interrupted at the dinner table? And whose fear is allowed to take up space? Now, that might sound obvious, but it has some big consequences. If masculinity is practice, not essence, then it can change. If it can change, then responsibility comes back to us. What we can't hide is that saying of boys will be boys, or that's just how men are. We can't use that as an excuse anymore. Secondly, toxic ideologies dress themselves up as common sense. Now, Greg and I touched on the pull of simplistic, often online narratives about men and about how they really are and what women are really like. These ideologies are seductive because they offer certainty in a confusing world, give a ready-made story about who to blame, and promise a return to order if men just reclaim some mythical status. Now, from my perspective in psychotherapy, these ideologies don't heal men's pain. What they do is they anesthetize it and then redirect it outward, often at the very people closest to them. Now, thirdly, you can't talk honestly about masculinity without talking about systems. In season 7, we've been working with the idea that the personal is political and that patriarchy sits alongside the so-called free market as one of the big stories shaping our world. But is it simply that, a story? Masculinity doesn't float in midair. It's held in place by such things as laws and policies, economic arrangements, religious narratives, media and online ecosystems, and everyday family practices. If we only focus on the individual man and ignore the system, we end up blaming men for things they did not create and letting the system off the hook for damage they are absolutely responsible for and do create. So in this episode, I want to weave 3 things together. Masculinity as a practice shaped by systems vulnerable to toxic stories. And then ask, what can you do differently tomorrow? So let's bring this right down to the micro level. Your body, your relationships, and your community. Number 1, masculinity in your body. Anthropology is really good at reminding us that culture lives in the body. For example, notice how masculinity shows up somatically for you. Do you tense your jaw or chest when you feel vulnerable? Do you speak more loudly to sound in control, in charge? Do you walk into a room scanning that room for threat or status? Or do you hold your breath when you're about to say something honest? Now, these are not random habits. They're embodied responses to the story you've been told about what a man should be. In control, not weak, not needy, not too much. Now, from the Making Good Men Great perspective, this part is the part of the construct itself. The persona you've built to survive in a patriarchy, often at the cost of your authentic self. So here is a practical reflection. Over the next week, pick one recurring situation, a staff meeting, family dinner, a difficult client, and simply notice what your body does. Don't judge, just collect data. Now, the second one is masculinity in your relationships. Now, Greg and I talked about emotional responsiveness and the difference between aggression and healthy assertiveness. Ask yourself, when someone close to you is upset with you, what's your first impulse? Shut down, to talk over them, to justify, or to fix? How often do you say, I don't know what to do, but I'm here and I'm going to stay present? Now, this is where the patriarchal pillars for making good men great are useful. And these are territory, hierarchy, acquisition, competition, and combativeness. In a tough conversation, which pillar is driving you? Is it territory? If I put it in words, then this is my space, my right, don't question me. If it's hierarchical, I know more and you should listen. If it's about acquisition, the verbalizing of it is, I need to win this argument. I need to be in charge. Competition sounds a little bit like this. If you're right, then I must be wrong. And that's intolerable. And combativeness is I feel cornered and I will attack. Now, these are deeply ingrained habits, not moral defects. But if you don't see them, they will run you. So the last one is masculinity in the wider system. So in the conversation with Greg, which we touched on how politics, religion, and social media shape the mental environment men live in. So let's take social media, for example. Algorithms reward outrage, certainty, and dominance. Now, nuanced voices are quieter and they're harder to find. Now, men who are already struggling with shame and alienation are highly vulnerable to anyone who says, "You're right, it is everybody else's fault. You've been robbed. Now take your power back." From a clinical perspective, I see this create what I would call the moral injury in everyday life, not just in veterans or first responders or in obvious trauma contexts. Men find themselves acting in ways that violate their deeper values, then feel trapped between guilt and defensiveness. So the question becomes, how do I resist these toxic currents without pretending I'm somehow above them? Now, this is where practice comes in. So let me suggest a few ways in which we can practice the different masculinity. Now, you might want to come back to this part with a notebook. So maybe listen to this podcast again. So firstly, there's the micro pause practice. The next time you feel triggered, angry, dismissed, misunderstood, hurt, try this. Pause for one breath. It's not dramatic, it's not performative, just a conscious inhale and exhale. Then name what's happening inside you in simple language. I feel disrespected. I feel stupid right now. I feel scared I'm going to lose control. Then the next step is choose a response that fits your core values, not the man box script, the patriarchal script. Now you might say, give me a moment, I'm reacting and I want to answer you properly. Or I'm angry, but I want to stay in this conversation together. I know it almost sounds too simple, but this is how you begin to shift from constructed self to authentic self in real time. You're no longer doing just the patriarchal reflex. You're practicing something quite different. The second bit is that there's a 3-question debrief. So at the end of the day, pick one interaction that mattered. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. And ask yourself the following 3 questions. 1, what story about being a man was I enacting there? For example, I had to have the answer. I had to have the solution. Real men are not ambivalent about things. They're definite. Secondly, where did that story come from? Was it your dad, your coach, the church, your workplace? Do you think it's a political or a religious narrative? Does it come from a podcast that you've listened to? Now, hopefully mine is not the problem, but there is a stack of stuff out in the manosphere which is definitely toxic. Now, over time, this debrief trains your awareness. You start to see how deeply internalized patriarchy really is. Not as a stick to beat yourself up with, but as material you can work with. So here's a values check. Who am I when no one's watching? Anthropology talks about practice. Psychotherapy talks about values and emotion, conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. And they often intersect in a really simple exercise. So write down 5 values you want your life to express. Not what are men supposed to be, but what you actually are. Some of those values might be courage, kindness, integrity, curiosity, justice, playfulness. And then I want you to ask yourself, what is one small way I can embody each of these values this week? So, for instance, courage. Have one honest conversation you've been avoiding. Kindness. Check in on a mate who's gone quiet. Curiosity. Listen to someone you disagree with without trying to win. Now, this is how masculinity really shifts. Not through a grand declaration online, but through hundreds of small embodied acts that are more aligned with who you actually are and want to be. Now, what about partners, family, and friends that are listening? 3 invitations for you. Name the moments of growth when you see them. Hey, I noticed you didn't shut down in that conversation. That really mattered to me. Refuse to collude with harmful scripts. When someone excuses bad behavior with, well, that's just how men are, don't let it slide. You don't have to start a war, but you can say, I don't buy that. I know men who act differently. And thirdly, protect your boundaries. Supporting men's growth does not mean absorbing endless harm. Healthy masculinity and healthy boundaries and guardrails always go together. In Making Good Men Great, we talk about moving from a patriarchal model of power to a relational model. Power with, not power over. And everything I've just outlined is part of that shift. So, how do we take that from listening to living? So let me bring it all together. From the conversation with Greg and from decades in clinical practice, I'd summarize it this way. Masculinity is lived, not theorized. Masculinity is in my breath, my posture, my tone, the choices that I make when things get hard. The system matters, but so do your micro decisions. You didn't build patriarchy, but you can stop rehearsing it in your body and in your relationships. Change is not about hating men or idolizing some mythical soft male. It's about integrating strength with empathy, exercising clarity with humility, and agency with accountability. That's the heart of the Making Good Men Great vision. So here's my invitation as you finish listening to this episode. Pick one situation this week where you usually default to an old script. Use the micro pause, do the 3 questions, and ask yourself very honestly, did I move one step closer to the man I actually want to be? If you're comfortable, share those reflections with someone you trust. If you're in a position to do so, bring them into, say, for example, a men's group, or bring them into your volunteer organization, your workplace, your community. Because the shift we're talking about is here and not just about being a personal shift, it's part of a bigger journey we've set for season 7, right from the beginning. From the micro to the macro, from individual change to global healing. So that, folks, brings us to the end of this solo follow-up with my conversation with Professor Greg Downey. If you found this useful, please follow Inspire Change with Gunter. Leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or any of your platforms that you listen to your podcasts on. It helps people to find the show more easily, and frankly, it helps the right man find a different story about themselves. You can also keep up with my work, the Making Good Men Great framework, and my books via the links in the show notes. So until next time, keep paying attention to how you do masculinity in everyday life. Notice the scripts, challenge the ones that don't serve you, and practice, however imperfectly, a version of manhood that is worthy of you and the people that you love. I'm Gunter. Thanks for listening and keep inspiring change. On this show, we talk a lot about living with purpose, slowing down, paying attention, and being intentional about the choices we make every day. Because when we simplify the noise around us, we can better hear what really matters. Empathy, connection, and showing up as the best version of ourselves. That's why I'm genuinely pleased to welcome our newest sponsor, Distill Union. Their philosophy aligns beautifully with what we do here. Distill Union creates slick, thoughtfully designed essentials, wallets, key organizers, phone cases, all built with a less is more approach. Their Wally wallets, Ferris key organizers, these are everyday tools that make life easier, cleaner, and calmer. In that simplicity, there's space for clarity. There's space for change. As a thank you to our Inspire Change community, they're offering 20% off any product with the promo code Inspire Change. Have a look, try them out, and see how simplifying your day can open the door to something deeper. Visit distillunion.com and enjoy 20% off any product with the promo code Inspire Change. That's distillunion.com with promo code Inspire Change to check out.
Hello, and welcome to all our listeners. This week, we would like to express our gratitude to those of you listening in Maryland. Your support has brought Maryland to number 12 on the USA's top 20 listeners list for the first time ever in the entire history of the podcast. Congratulations! And a special thanks to our listeners in Kensington for bringing Maryland to the USA's top 20 listeners list, and our deepest gratitude for promoting positive social change. We cannot express how grateful we are for your continued support across the continent and around the world. Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in and supporting positive social change here and around the globe. This makes you a part of Gunter's efforts in transforming not only men's lives, but lives in general, and we are grateful that you have joined us. I, Devonna Prinzi, the co-executive producer, and our showrunner, Miranda Spigner-Sapone, sincerely thank you and ask that you please take the time to like, follow, subscribe, and share as your efforts make a difference to everyone here at Inspire Change with Gunter. Please remember, if you want to share your story of social change, feel free to reach out to the show directly. Please see the show notes for our contact information. As always, thank you to each and every one of our listeners, and most importantly, please keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.